Cat or coyote? Mystery animal haunts Akron, Ohio. In a truly classic Fortean way, some strange animal had the good folks of Akron, Ohio in a jittery way this past August. Witnesses swore that they were seeing some sort of large cat. However, state wildlife officials eventually ruled that the cat was in reality a dog. Maybe people were seeing both, maybe neither. Here are 3 accounts from area newspapers to help you decide. A cat got the mayor's tongue yesterday. It's believed to be a 150-pound cat, a mountain lion perhaps, and Mayor Donald L. Plisquelic wanted to put the word out that it's been spotted prowling the western edge of Akron. It could be dangerous, and we want to advise people to be cautious, he said at a news conference. 2 hours later, a 13-year-old Norton boy reported seeing a large cat romping across the street from a lumber yard. "I saw a big tan cat, okay?" said Teddy Odell. "It was playing across the street from the Carter lumber. At first I thought it was a cat, but then I figured a cat wouldn't be that big. I came home and told Mom about it. She really didn't think anything of it, and neither did I. Then our next-door neighbor called and said a mountain lion was loose." Police and health officials were dispatched to the scene to investigate. Odell said the animal he saw was waist-high, muscular, and had a black tip, long tail. Plisquelic said the cat sighted on 3 earlier occasions had not caused any injury or damage, but he cautioned residents to stay away from any large animal running wild. The earlier sightings put the animal just within the western boundary of Akron at the intersection of Ingersoll Drive and Rockcliffe Drive, near St. Michael's Ave and Cordova Ave. The animal was described as fawn-colored, about 30 inches tall, and a bit thin. A South Hawkins Ave sighting was made Sunday by Akron police officer Hugh Sullivan, who said the cat was feeding on a roadkill. In addition, there had been a number of audibles or reports of strange sounds. "The mountain lion's call is a high-pitched screech like a tomcat," said David Martin, supervisor of environmental health for Akron's health department. Mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are not native to Ohio. The city checked with the L&L Exotic Animal Farm in Copley, but none of its lions, tigers, or mountain lions had escaped. Residents were advised to be careful, especially at dawn or dusk when walking small pets in the area, taking out the garbage, or making shortcuts across fields or through wooded areas. Residents were asked to report any sightings to the Akron Police Department. Meanwhile, the city is consulting with animal experts to figure out a way to stalk and capture the cat. At the Norton Police Department, a dispatcher who declined to give his name was not fazed by the sightings. "Every 5 years, it seems like this big cat appears because Norton is the home of the Norton Panthers," he said. "We go on a wild goose chase every 5 years. Haven't seen one yet." But Teddy Odell's mother is a believer. "See, we're from the city and we just moved out here," Kathy Odell said. "We're seeing cows and horses running around here, and when he said he saw this huge cat-like thing, I just figured it was a huge dog. All I'm hearing is, 'I told you so, Mom.'" The cat's not in the bag yet. Akron area police departments were prepped with reports yesterday about a large, cat-like animal on the loose, but the creature proved too elusive to catch. "I don't think it's a fairy tale," Mary Wright said as she stood a stone's throw from an overgrown field in Norton, where a teenage boy said he saw the animal. Akron Mayor Donald L. Plisquelic called a news conference Wednesday to say that a 150-pound cat, possibly a mountain lion, had been spotted on the west edge of Akron 3 times, once by a police officer, Hugh Sullivan. The Ohio Division of Wildlife said it would help track the animal. David Martin, supervisor of environmental health for Akron's health department, said yesterday there had been 3 new reports of sightings since Wednesday. An animal was seen in a trash bin behind the Adjusta Post Manufacturer Company on Summit Road in Norton, at Ohio 21 and Minor Road in Copley Township, and across from Carter Lumber in Norton, Martin said. Martin said he and his son canvassed a field across from the lumber yard until mosquitoes drove them away Wednesday evening. They found dog tracks that were about 4 inches wide and long. "It really could be something like a Great Dane. The nails were probably an inch long," Martin said. Mary Wright, who lives near the lumber company, said she saw large paw prints in dust on her car yesterday. "I go to work early in the morning at 4 o'clock. I'll be more alert," she said. "It could harm somebody. There's a lot that comes out of those ledges," she added, pointing to tree-covered bluffs east of her property. Across the street at Carter Lumber, employees watched a game warden survey the field where Teddy Odell said he saw a muscular, waist-high cat with a black-tipped tail. "There's a lot of area for it to run around here," salesman Don Means said. "Plus there's a lot of rabbits this year." Down the road, Catherine Wassel said several large garbage bags were dragged from a trash can to her garage last week. "It'd have to be a couple of dogs to pull them that far," she said. But Wassel doubted that the intruder was a mountain lion, because she said her pet poodle would have reacted. "When something's around, Samantha really hits that door," Wassel said. A coyote and a mountain lion are on the loose in southwest part of the city, according to police. "We are convinced there are two animals out there," Sergeant William Ellison said Tuesday. These witnesses describe a large cat, 100-plus pounds by most estimates, light tan. The most recent sighting occurred Friday, Ellison said. David Martin of the City Health Department said officials on Tuesday discussed hiring a trapper who could humanely capture a large cat. He said that he is gathering information about a company that specializes in humane captures, but that no decision to set traps has been made. Specialists in the Ohio Division of Wildlife, after viewing a home video of an animal prowling a neighborhood, said last week the elusive animal was a coyote and that people had mistaken the coyote for a mountain lion. But police continued interviewing witnesses to determine whether there was more than one animal roaming the area. "The people we interviewed definitely saw a cat, not a coyote or another type of canine," Ellison said. "We have to believe these witnesses. They are very credible." Giant bird. Just before sunrise on a summer morning in 1990, I was driving south on Highway 21 in South Carolina with my wife and a friend on our way to Hunting Island State Park for a camping excursion. Our routine was to stay up until the early morning hours, then load up and head out. I would drive while they slept, and when we arrived at our destination, I would sleep while they set up camp. We were traveling at about 55 to 60 miles per hour when, after rounding a slight curve 4 miles northwest of the intersection with I-951 near the Combahee River, I noticed something in my lane up ahead. It was just before sunrise, light enough to see, but not yet broad daylight. At first I thought it might be a dog or deer, but as I drove closer, I noticed it was too tall to be either. I then took it to be a person and slowed down, but I soon noticed that it was nothing like a person. At this moment, it looked up and straight at me. It was a great bird, dark brown to coral gray in color, with yellow eyes and a very large yellow beak. It was very much like a golden eagle, except for its tremendous size, between 6 feet and 7 feet tall. Its wingspan was wider than the highway lane, and about 60 to 70% of the overall width of the entire road. I would say about 16 to 18 feet. The wings themselves appeared to be about 4 to 5 feet, from leading edge to trailing edge. But this was more difficult to gauge. Its feet were about 3 times as large as my hands and easily visible. I was astonished, but also fearful. I felt much like a swimmer who had just spotted a very large shark. As soon as the bird looked up, it turned around 180 degrees in a hopping motion, and I noticed it was standing on a deer. I grabbed my fellow occupants in the vehicle and started shaking them and screaming for them to wake up, while slowing to avoid striking the animal with my truck. In another very odd-looking hopping motion and a pump of its wings, it lifted the young deer from the roadway in a rocking motion. I could actually see the wind created from the motion of its wings affecting the surrounding grass and bushes on the side of the road, on an otherwise perfectly still morning. With 2 more cycles of its wings, it completely cleared the treetops in this mature growth forest. These were very large oak trees for the most part. Obviously, I was very excited to see this tremendous creature, and was frustrated that others didn't wake up in time to see it. The entire encounter probably lasted only 15 to 20 seconds. When the bird left my field of view, it was traveling northeast. I could estimate that the deer weighed about 50 pounds. It was a young deer that still had a few very faint hints of fawn spots on its side, only visible as the deer flexed when lifted from the road. I felt the bird had killed the deer, possibly hunting from a very large oak tree limb that stretched out over the highway that I noticed on a later trip. But I had no way of knowing for sure. I could clearly see the deer's neck was broken and its tongue hanging from its mouth, dribbling saliva. I have spent most of my life hunting, fishing, and camping in South Carolina. I have seen many deer in all manner of conditions. This really looked like a very fresh kill. Vehicle strike was possible, but unlikely due to an almost total absence of any people in this remote area, much less anyone in a vehicle. I will sign a sworn affidavit, take any test including a polygraph, and swear on the Bible in a court of law that this statement is 100% true, and the information in this account is as close to absolute accuracy as humanly possible. I saw what I saw. Caddy visits Pacific Northwest shores. This interesting account comes from staffer Scott Gorman of the Everett, Washington Herald in the paper's October 31st issue. Many of the kids at your door or Halloween party will be dressed up as rather typical universal monsters, vampires and werewolves, etc. But if they had a shred of coastal Northwest pride, at least one would be decked out as a caddy, the elusive sea creature that once or twice a year reportedly pokes its graceful neck up from the North Pacific coastal waters, surprising onlookers. Dubbed Cadborosaurus and nicknamed Caddy by researchers at the University of British Columbia, after Cadboro Bay near Victoria, where the creatures are sometimes spotted. The creature is a rather large marine animal that resembles the fabled Scottish Loch Ness Monster, and like Nessie, Caddy turns up just enough to keep his or her mystique. Doris Sinclair, a Lake Stevens resident, had an encounter with a caddy in February near Ocean Shores on the Washington coast. I was at a spot on the jetty, sitting on the rocks, and I spotted him about 30 feet from where I was sitting, Sinclair says. The sea was calm on that sunny winter day. I saw this wonderfully long, slender neck just rise up out of the water, Sinclair says. He made this nodding motion, precisely the same motions as it rose out of the water 4 or 5 times. I only saw the neck and head, about 5 or 6 feet out of the water. It suggested elegance. It had a kind of dignity about it. Sinclair lost sight of the caddy when it was about 500 feet from shore. I felt honored, she said of the sighting. My husband was thoughtful but skeptical. My kids interested, she says. But then I told my brother. He said, uh-huh. At that point, Sinclair decided to keep the caddy to herself. It's uncomfortable to be disbelieved, she said. That concern about being labeled as a bit of a kook might keep other caddy spotters from coming forward, says Paul LeBlanc, a professor of oceanography of the University of British Columbia. But there's something out there, he says, and it's worth studying. What's out there? That's still an open question, but it is some sort of marine animal with a long neck, a horsey face, with a big mouth and eyes. All the reports are about the same, although some say it's furry like a seal. About 1 or 2 credible sightings of the caddy are made each year, LeBlanc says, by very rational people who are sometimes embarrassed about what people might think. Hardly anyone has seen the creature below the neck, LeBlanc says. Black dog in a blackberry bush. In the early 1990s, I used to live in a semi-detached house in Nuthall Road, Nottingham. It had been a long garden with a disused railway line at the end blocked off with wooden fencing and a full 6.5-foot hedge to the right. The left-hand side used to have a wire fence, but this had long since been removed, and growing between the old posts were blackberry bushes, with vast gaps in between through which you could nip into the next-door gardens. The neighbor was an old lady we got on with so well it never seemed worth putting up a new fence. Besides, she had 3 marvelous apple trees ripe for the picking. One night, a friend and I heard a noise outside in the garden. It sounded like somebody creeping about outside, so we went to investigate. Nothing. Not a soul about. It was a frosty cold night, and not a cloud in the sky, and plenty of moonlight. As we stood halfway up the lawn, we heard a rustling sound in one of the blackberry bushes, which got louder as we approached. We thought it was a bird rummaging about inside. The bush was only a few feet high and we could see more or less all around it, but the sound continued to increase. We walked closer to investigate, and I pushed the branches apart and peered in to see a large thrush looking at me. After staring at me for a few seconds, it quickly darted under cover and the bush started to rustle violently. I jerked away and started walking backwards. When I had backed away some 8 feet, the rustling stopped abruptly and a black funnel of fog or mist shot out and arced into the air. As it descended in front of us, it began to take the shape of a huge black dog. Well, I say a dog, but it reminded me of the keepers or gargoyles in the film Ghostbusters. It was roughly 4.5 feet tall and about 3 feet across, black like a panther, huge fangs dripping with saliva, and to be honest, the most terrifying thing I had ever had the misfortune to meet. It landed with a resounding thud on the turf and started to make a dry, throaty, rasping sound, building up to a deep warning growl. Then it opened its huge, red, glowing, piercing eyes. It's impossible to explain the feeling of terror and hopelessness this produced. We both stood transfixed, unable to move or scream or even run. It was as though it wanted us to run, was playing with us. There was a definite intelligence behind those eyes, and it was studying everything about us. It felt as if we spent an eternity transfixed by its gaze. It stepped slowly forward, and I heard my friend's footfalls as he frantically ran to the house, leaving me with this thing bearing down on me. That was it. The autopilot came on, and I turned and fled, with tears rolling down my cheeks in absolute terror. I had never run that fast in my life, and never will again. It was pure adrenaline-fueled panic. I slammed into the back door that, thankfully, my friend had not locked behind him. It burst open and I fell through, expecting to be torn to shreds at any moment. I managed to slam the door shut, fumbled for the bolts, and locked it, then fell crying against it in the vain hope my body weight would somehow stop the huge beast from plowing straight through. But nothing happened. My friend had collapsed in front of the freezer, his face snow white and his hair standing on end. He was shaking and mumbling, but I was too terrified to comprehend his ramblings. But after a few minutes, we both moved into the adjoining room and looked out the window overlooking the garden. There was nothing there. I saw my reflection in the glass. I too was ghostly white and my hair was standing up. You read of such things, but unless you have actually seen it, you wouldn't believe how strange it looks. I stopped shaking after about 15 minutes, by which time my friend had managed to compose himself. We tried to compare what we had seen, to make some sort of sense of it. We agreed on what had occurred, but could find no rational explanation. He left in a taxi a short while later, and refused to talk about the subject whenever it was mentioned subsequently. He just said he never wanted to think about it again. Although we remained friends, he never came back to my house. I myself never went into the back garden of that house again. I moved about 18 months later, without setting foot outside the back door, although other members of my family did without incident. I could never tell anybody what had happened. It was too crazy. Large black dogs with glowing red eyes do not leap out of small blackberry bushes in back gardens. I spent years terrified of the dark because of this encounter, wondering why it had happened and what the hell was the point. Later, I came to realize the terror it had inspired in me was the very point of its appearance. I had been struggling with fear of death and worrying about the point of existence as a whole. I had become a complete nihilist, set on a path of self-destruction. Live fast and die young was a motto that I actively embraced and sought to live out. The encounter with the black dog seems to me to have been an externalization of my internal terror. I couldn't cope with it, and it was destroying me. I needed to be given a jolt somehow. The black dog did this, and did indeed hound me out of Nottingham. Crazy Creek Monster. North of Fontana, California, 2 teenage girls accidentally met with a 7-foot-tall, brown-haired creature covered with slime and moss. It seems that the girls were driving near the Lytle Creek when the monster stood up out of the water beside their car. They reported the incident to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Fontana Station. The deputies said about 300 persons armed with guns started to swarm the area every night into hot pursuit of the creature, which is still believed to roam at night. The hunters failed to turn up the hairy beast, and after a few nights finally ended their search. Northern California has been noted for the sightings of some kind of hairy creature which walks in a human upright stance. Abominable snowman is the more common name given to these beasts. Just recently, October 1967, 2 men ran into a huge hairy creature in the wilderness area northeast of Eureka, California, and luckily were able to capture the creature on film. The photos can be seen in the February issue of Argosy magazine. Sheep speak. In about 1993, while I was still at school, my friends and I were making our way to a party near Tipton, St. John, in deepest, darkest Devon. It was quite late, probably about 1 a.m. Yes, we were late for the party, and we took a shortcut through a field. It was pitch black, and we could hear sheep making an awful racket at the other end of the field. Being kids and being a bit drunk, we started making bleating noises at the sheep to try to rile them. Then we started shouting at them in English, but in a sheepy type way, if that makes any sense. It seemed as if they were responding, and every time we called them, they would bleat back. This was hysterical until one of my friends shouted, "Come over here," to the sheep. "No, you come here," came a reply from where the sheep were in the same quavery type of voice we had been using. We all just stopped in our tracks, staring at each other before legging it out of the field and up the road. Now I know sheep can't talk, but it's pretty disturbing to think someone was in that field with us at 1 a.m, someone deranged enough to call out to us in sheep speak. As we come to an end, I wanted to give a special shout out to the channel Zonefly. If you like stories like mine and want more, check out his channel. I love watching his videos and they're extra long. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you want more videos like this, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. You can even add your own spooky stories in the comments or on my Reddit page r/I have a spooky story. Maybe your story will end up in the next video. Good night, sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite.